She was trapped in a cage with a wolf by her own husband. Then a cowboy appeared, but something felt off. Golden light sifted through the crooked slats of the wooden cage, bathing the frost-dusted ground in slivers of amber. Evelyn Harper, 27, sat motionless on the hard-packed earth, her back pressed against a wall of splintered pine. The air was sharp and cold, cutting into her lungs with each breath. Her eyes, once soft and silver blue, now burned hollow with exhaustion. Blood clung to her bottom lip where her teeth had broken the skin. Every muscle in her body ached, but she did not dare move, not with the wolf watching her. The beast stood only a few feet away, its yellow eyes catching the morning light like shards of glass. It had been pacing for the better part of an hour, tail low, head level, as though measuring her patience or fear. A chain attached to a collar at its neck dragged behind it, catching occasionally on a protruding nail or rock. Evelyn watched it with a stillness that bordered on trance. She had learned, sometime in the hours before dawn, that any movement too sudden would draw its attention. A blink too long. A cough. A shift of weight. The wolf would inch closer, lips pulling back just enough to show the suggestion of fangs. The only thing thinner than the wooden walls surrounding her was the space between her and death. From outside, boots crunched against ice-flecked soil. She stiffened. The wolf's ears twitched toward the sound. A moment later, the door creaked open, its hinges groaning under the weight of cold and rot. Thomas Harper stepped in, casting a long, narrow shadow across the enclosure. He looked older than he had a year ago. His cheeks had hollowed, stubble thick on a jaw that once had been clean-shaven every morning like clockwork. He wore a coat that was torn at the sleeve, a revolver holstered at his hip, and a scarf wrapped too tight around his neck. His eyes, once kind, or something like kind, were unreadable. Evelyn didn't move. She couldn't afford to. The wolf had turned to face him now, tail still low, its breathing slow but alert. Thomas took one step inside, enough to let the chill in with him. Still alive, he muttered, more to himself than to her. That's something. She said nothing. He stepped forward, careful not to startle the animal. The wolf growled low and long. Thomas raised his hand, not to threaten, but to quiet it. It's just me, he said softly. Calm now. The wolf didn't. Evelyn's voice cracked the silence like dry timber. Why are you doing this? Thomas didn't answer at first. He turned his gaze to the wolf, then to the sky through the slats. He sighed, long and tired. Because they need to believe you're wild. Untamable. Dangerous. To whom? To them, he replied, voice hardening. The men in the valley. The ones with money. They pay for wild things. Rare things. You're selling me. Thomas didn't look ashamed. I'm keeping you alive. I was alive when I had a name, Thomas. Not when I became a thing to be bartered. His jaw tightened. He looked away. Don't make this harder than it is. Outside, the trees swayed under a wind that sounded like weeping. She turned her eyes back to the wolf. It had stopped pacing. Now it sat, still and waiting, eyes fixed on Thomas. She envied the beast, its freedom, its simplicity. It didn't lie. It didn't pretend love. It only survived. What happens if it kills me? She asked quietly. Then you weren't strong enough, he said without blinking. A long silence passed between them. Thomas stepped back toward the exit. Before he left, he turned over his shoulder. I'll come for you before nightfall. When the door shut again, Evelyn let herself breathe. The wolf moved, not forward, but sideways, keeping its eyes locked on her. She didn't know how long she sat like that. Minutes, maybe an hour. Her body screamed to stretch, to move, to curl into something less cold, but she held her posture. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly. A storm was coming. The air smelled of it, wet pine and cold dirt. The wolf lifted its head to sniff. Her thoughts wandered to the day they arrived here. The land had been quiet then, newly thawed in spring. Thomas had laughed as they stepped out of the wagon, said it was a blank page waiting to be written. He had carved their initials into the doorframe of the cabin they built together. Evelyn remembered the warmth of his arms, the promises, the stories of orchards and children. She remembered hope. That version of Thomas had vanished not long after the second winter set in. The isolation chewed away at his spirit. Then came the raiders. Then the famine. Then the screams in the dark. Something in him broke. She had tried to fix it. She had fought to hold on. But love was not armor, and she had nothing left to protect him with. Another hour passed. The wind grew louder. Branches creaked above like bones straining in their sockets. Evelyn risked shifting her foot. The wolf didn't move. She whispered, "You don't want this either, do you?" The wolf blinked. Outside the cage, a crunch, different from Thomas's earlier steps. Softer. Slower. The wolf's ears perked up. Evelyn strained to listen. More footsteps. Deliberate. Measured. She crawled quietly toward the nearest gap in the wood and peered through. A figure emerged from the snow-veiled trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, mounted on a gray horse with tired flanks and a braided mane. A hat shaded his face, long duster coat flapping against his legs. A stranger. She pressed closer to the gap. He dismounted without urgency, boots landing heavy in the snow. He moved like a man who'd seen much and spoken little about any of it. The horse exhaled steam. The man stepped toward the cage. Evelyn shifted to hide behind the wall. The wolf stood now, tail straight, body rigid. The stranger stopped 10 feet from the door. He looked at the lock, then the wolf, then the silhouette of the woman behind the wood. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and calm. What kind of man builds a cage like this? She didn't answer. I ain't here to hurt you, he said. Still silence. Name's Jackson. I'm heading west. She peeked out again. Jackson's face was carved from wind and grit. A scar curled across one cheek, the kind not easily earned. His eyes were dark and steady, like old river stones. You in trouble? He asked. The wolf snarled. Jackson tilted his head. That animal yours? She whispered, no. He didn't flinch. You bleeding? No. You armed? She shook her head. He looked around. Ain't seen another soul for miles. You alone? No. She heard the leather creak as he shifted weight. Your man done this to you? She hesitated. Then, yes. Jackson exhaled, long and slow. You want out? Yes. He approached the cage. The wolf stepped between him and the door, teeth bared. Jackson didn't draw his gun. Instead, he crouched, eye level with the beast. You ain't mine to fight, he said softly. But you stand in my way. The wolf's growl faded to a low whine. Jackson looked at her again. What's your name? Evelyn. He nodded. I'll be back by nightfall. And he was gone. The wolf turned to her, then settled in the corner again. For a long while, neither moved. The snow fell heavier. Light dimmed to gray. Evelyn's body screamed for warmth. She whispered Jackson's name like a prayer. As dusk broke over the pines, thunder cracked again, closer this time. And then, voices. Men. More than one. Coarse and laughing. Her heart ceased. She pressed her back to the farthest wall of the cage. The wolf stood again. The door opened. Thomas. He was flanked by 2 others. One had a broken nose and a missing ear. The other carried a whip coiled like a snake. Thomas didn't smile. Time's come. Evelyn shook her head. You said tomorrow. He stepped forward. They upped the price. The man with the whip reached for her. The wolf lunged, snarling, fangs bared. The men fell back, shouting. Then, gunfire. One shot. The wolf collapsed, legs twitching, blood blooming into the snow. Evelyn screamed. Thomas spun, drawing his revolver. Who's there? From the trees, a voice. Put it down. Jackson stepped out of the gloom, rifle leveled, coat soaked in storm water. His face was calm. Cold. You're outnumbered, stranger, one of the men growled. Maybe, Jackson said. But I've killed men for less. Thomas raised his gun. Jackson fired first. The blast echoed through the trees. Thomas's hand flew open. The revolver dropped. Blood trickled from his shoulder. The other men bolted. Jackson approached, gun still raised. Thomas dropped to his knees. Jackson kicked the cage door open. Come on. Evelyn crawled out, dazed, eyes fixed on the dying wolf. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jackson offered her his hand. She took it. Together, they walked into the falling snow. Behind them, the cage creaked in the wind. Snow fell thick as ash over the pines, blurring the shapes of trees and muting every footstep. Evelyn stumbled after Jackson, her boots slipping in the half-frozen mud that wound through the forest. Her legs ached from cold and shock, her lips cracked and bleeding from windburn, but she kept moving. She hadn't spoken since the wolf collapsed in a pool of red. The sound of the shot still echoed in her chest. Behind them, the cage and the man she once called husband were swallowed by the woods. Thomas hadn't followed. Not yet. Jackson led the way in silence, rifle slung over one shoulder and eyes constantly shifting across the terrain. He moved with the quiet purpose of someone who belonged to the wild, whose instincts were older than the trail. He didn't ask if she could keep up. He didn't offer comfort. But when the cold bit deeper and her steps grew more uneven, he slowed without looking back. They crossed a half-frozen creek by twilight. Evelyn slipped on a moss-covered stone and nearly fell in, but Jackson caught her elbow. His grip was strong, but careful. "You need rest," he said, voice low and graveled. She nodded, breath too short to speak. He found a thicket of evergreens, branches so tightly knit they blocked the wind. He cleared snow with practiced movements, snapping low limbs to form a rough lean-to. Then he pulled a small pouch from his coat and struck flint to tinder. The fire crackled to life in the center of the grove, soft orange light flickering against the white bark and their pale skin. Evelyn sat beside it and finally looked at him. Dirt streaked her cheeks. Blood had dried on her collar. "Why did you help me?" Jackson didn't glance up from his work. He was skinning a rabbit he'd caught with a snare she hadn't seen him set. "You looked like someone who didn't have many more nights left." She lowered her gaze. "That's not the same as caring." "No," he agreed. "It's not." The answer hurt in a strange way. Not for its cruelty. There was none in his voice, but for its honesty. The fire popped between them. She studied him. His face bore the weathering of years. A fine line at the corner of his mouth, a scar beneath his eye, the kind made by blade or claw. His coat was patched with hide, his boots mended with sinew. He was not young, but he was sharp, built of leather and wire. Whatever life had done to him, it had not broken him. Not yet. "I was married," she said, eyes on the flame. "I figured. He wasn't always like that. When we first came west, he'd talk about orchards. He wanted apple trees. Can you believe that?" She smiled faintly, a bitter twitch of the lips. "He had soft hands once. I don't know when they turned into fists." Jackson said nothing. He skewered the rabbit meat and held it over the fire. "I used to think if I just stayed, if I just endured long enough, the man I loved would come back." "And now?" he asked. She shook her head. "Now I think he never left. I just didn't want to see who he really was." The rabbit sizzled. Jackson handed her a stick and took one for himself. She bit into it hungrily, not realizing how starved she was. Fat and smoke coated her tongue. He finally spoke again. "You going east or west?" She paused. "I hadn't thought that far. You're free now. You have to choose something." Her chest tightened at the word. Free. It felt alien. Unreal. A joke told too early after the funeral. "I don't know how to be alone," she whispered. He nodded. "That'll pass. Or it won't. Either way, you keep walking." She looked at him. "Do you always speak like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're a man who's already survived what killed everyone else." His eyes, dark and thoughtful, met hers. "Sometimes that's exactly what it feels like." They sat in silence for a time, watching the fire dissolve their shadows into the snow. The wind howled once, somewhere in the distance, but it did not find them. There. They woke to the sound of birds. Small, nervous calls from a pair of chickadees in the treetops. Evelyn's bones ached from cold, but the fire had burned just enough to keep frostbite at bay. Jackson was already up, packing his gear with brisk efficiency. She stood, brushing pine needles from her skirt. "I need to go back," she said. He froze. "Back? To the cabin. There's something I need." He didn't question her. He just nodded once and turned course. They traveled northeast, moving in silence again. The snow had let up, replaced by a thin mist that clung to the forest like breath. Every now and then, Evelyn glanced behind them, half expecting to see Thomas's face leering through the trees. But there was only emptiness and the low creak of branches. The cabin emerged like a ghost from the fog, its roof sagging under snow, door half open. She stepped inside, heart pounding. Everything was how she remembered. The wood stove rusted with disuse, the cot where she had once sewn buttons back onto Thomas's coat, the jar of dried berries near the window. She knelt at the hearth and pulled loose a floorboard. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a folded page. A letter. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She had written it to herself the night before the cage. A record. A promise. Words meant to survive her, if she didn't. She tucked it into her bodice and stood. Jackson waited outside, eyes on the tree line. His shoulders were tense. "We need to move," he said. "Did you see something?" "No. That's what bothers me." They departed without another word. Hours passed. The sun struggled to burn through the clouds, but failed. Evelyn began to notice the way Jackson moved, how he favored one leg slightly, how he stepped only where the snow had firm crust. He rarely looked down, sensing the ground by feel. He did not waste energy. She tried to mimic him. Around midday, they crossed a burned field. Black stumps jutted like broken teeth from the snow. Evelyn stepped over a charred cradle. She didn't ask what had happened here. She didn't want to know. By the time they reached the edge of the ridge, Evelyn's legs were shaking. Jackson stopped, crouched behind a boulder, and scanned the horizon. Ahead, the forest dipped into a shallow valley. A trail of smoke twisted into the sky from a clearing beyond. Campfire. Bandits, she asked. Traitors, he said. Or worse. She tensed. What do we do? He looked at her. We go around. They circled wide, staying uphill, out of sight. But as they moved, Evelyn spotted something in the brush, a small, battered doll, its face smeared with soot. She paused. Someone passed through here recently, she said. Jackson joined her, studied the tracks. 2 sets of footprints. 1 adult. 1 child. He followed the trail a few steps, then stopped. It splits. She looked at him. You're going after them. He hesitated. We should keep moving. But you won't. He nodded slowly. She knew then, this man had saved her, not because it was his duty, not out of kindness or conscience, but because it was who he was. Jackson couldn't walk past suffering. He could carry it, bury it, and never speak of it, but he could not ignore it. We'll go together, she said. He didn't argue. The trail led to a gully, shallow and cluttered with brush. There, huddled beneath a fallen tree, was a girl no older than 8. Her dress was torn. Her cheeks were red from wind. She clutched a bundle to her chest. Jackson crouched. We're not here to hurt you. The girl looked up, wide-eyed. My name's Evelyn, she said gently, kneeling beside her. Are you alone? The girl pointed toward the trees. A rustle, then a shout. A man burst from cover, face wild, beard matted. He held a blade, trembling. Stay back, he barked. Jackson stepped in front of Evelyn. Put the knife down. She's mine, the man screamed. You'll take her from me like the rest. Like the soldiers. Evelyn reached out. We don't want to hurt you. We want to help. He faltered, blinking hard. They burned the farm. Took my wife. My girl's all I got. She's still yours, Evelyn said gently. But you'll lose her if you die here. The man stared at her, tears streaming down his cracked face. His blade dropped to the snow. They left him at a nearby cave, safe, with fire and food. Jackson said little afterward. Evelyn didn't press him. By nightfall, they made camp under a windbreak near a granite outcrop. The girl was asleep beside Evelyn, curled like a cat. Jackson sat across the fire, sharpening a long knife with rhythmic strokes. She reminded me of someone, Evelyn said. He didn't look up. You don't owe me explanations. I'm not offering one. The fire crackled between them. What's west of here? She asked after a long pause. Nothing easy. She nodded. Then that's where I'm going. He met her eyes. For the first time, his face softened, not with a smile, but with a kind of acknowledgement. They didn't speak again that night. But when Evelyn lay down, it was not fear that kept her awake. It was the question of who she was becoming, and whether she could live with the answer. Tools. A hush settled over the valley as the sky bruised into dusk. Jackson crouched at the ridge, motionless, his eyes fixed on the smoke curling lazily from the bandit encampment below. Beside him, Evelyn peered over a flat stone, her breath low and shallow, the girl they'd rescued sleeping a short distance away under a blanket of brush and hide. The child's presence changed everything. They couldn't run anymore. The threat wasn't just to Evelyn now, it extended to anyone who crossed paths with these men. And Jackson knew, even before she said it aloud, that Evelyn wasn't going to leave without ending it. She studied the camp. For tents. 1 central fire. 3 men visible, 1 sharpening a blade, another laughing over a jug, the third pacing with a rifle slung lazily across his chest. But there were more. Footsteps crunched just out of view. A horse stamped its hoofs. A woman's voice, muffled but sharp, cried out, then silenced. Evelyn flinched. We go down there, she said. We don't come back the same. Jackson said nothing for a moment, then finally replied, Good. I'm tired of being who I've been. His hand rested briefly on the hilt of his knife before he reached for the rifle. He handed her a small revolver. Her fingers hesitated before closing around it. Ever fired one? Once, she said. Didn't like it. No one should, he answered. Point. Breathe. Never hesitate. She nodded, jaws set. Below, the fire crackled, sparks vanishing into the darkening sky. They moved quietly along the ridge, slipping from tree to tree, descending in a slow arc that would bring them behind the tents. The forest swallowed their presence. Every snow crunch was matched by a stillness afterward, waiting for discovery that never came. Jackson signaled her to stop. He lowered his voice to a whisper. We split. You circle left. Draw them if I give the signal. Don't shoot unless you have to. I'm not leaving you. You're not. You're protecting her, he said, motioning toward the child hidden under brush. Evelyn swallowed hard and nodded. The truth was, she didn't want to protect anymore. She wanted to fight. As she moved left, circling the tree line, Jackson crept down the slope, hugging the shadows. He was on them before they realized. A sharp whistle cut the air. Two heads turned. One went down before he even drew his weapon. Jackson struck with the rifle butt, swift and brutal. The second man fired a panic shot that tore through the air, missing by feet. Chaos bloomed. Evelyn emerged from behind a pine, raised the revolver, and fired. The shot rang true, hitting a wooden crate and scattering the men into motion. She ducked behind a wagon as bullets tore into the trees. Screams filled the air, overlapping with the terrified whinny of horses. The man with the jug sprinted toward the woods. Evelyn stood, hard hammering, and aimed. Her hands shook. She didn't pull the trigger. He turned and saw her. Before he could raise his weapon, Jackson tackled him from the side, sending both of them crashing into the snow. They rolled, grunting and clawing, fists slipping over wet wool and ice. Jackson drove a knee into the man's chest, pinned him, and drove his fist into his face until he stopped moving. A scream cut through the night, a woman's voice again. Then a door flung open at the back of one tent. A man emerged, dragging someone with him, a girl, younger than Evelyn, barefoot and half-dressed, her wrists bound. He held a pistol to her temple. Drop it, he shouted at Evelyn, or I blow her head clean off. She froze, revolver aimed squarely at him. Her heart beat too loud in her ears. Jackson was 30 feet away, half hidden behind a tree, blood at the corner of his mouth. He locked eyes with her, nodded once. The man barked, You hear me? Drop it. Evelyn stepped forward. No, she said. He sneered. You willing to kill this girl over pride? I'm not killing her, Evelyn said. You are. If you pull that trigger, she dies, and then you die. I promise you that. The man's grip tightened. His finger twitched on the trigger. Let her go, Evelyn said. And I'll let you live. It was a lie, but she said it like truth. He hesitated. Then, out of nowhere, a howl tore through the valley. Not from a wolf, but from deep in the trees, an echo of something wild and distant. The sound froze the man's hand. His head turned for a second, just long enough. Evelyn fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder. He dropped the girl, shrieking, and fell. Before he could reach his gun again, Jackson was on him, grabbing the weapon and slamming it into the snow. Silence fell, thick and final. The girl sobbed. Evelyn rushed forward, gathering her into her arms, whispering soft reassurances. Jackson stood over the wounded man, staring down at him. Don't, Evelyn said softly. Jackson didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, he stepped back. Tie him. She did. Rope from the nearby wagon, hands shaking from more than cold. They gathered what they could: food, blankets, weapons. Jackson found a battered journal in one of the tents, flipped through it, then tossed it into the fire without a word. Evelyn didn't ask. They left the man bound beside the fire. He would live, but not well. Not without warmth or help. Evelyn couldn't bring herself to look back. They returned to the cave by morning. The rescued girl and the child were fed, warmed. The man, the children's father, sat quietly by the fire, eyes dull. He had not spoken since they'd left. Something in him had broken. Evelyn approached him. We're heading west. There's a wagon trail that starts beyond the ridge. You could come. He shook his head. This is where I stop. She nodded. She understood. Jackson packed without comment. The girl clung to Evelyn's hand as they left the cave. The forest had changed. The sky had lifted, a thin sun peering weakly through the clouds. The snow crunched underfoot, but it was quieter now. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt warmth in her chest. Not safety, never that, but direction. They walked for hours. At the ridge's summit, Jackson paused. The land beyond stretched vast and untouched, golden plains, speckled forests, winding rivers too far to hear. It was promise and peril rolled into one. Evelyn stood beside him. You think it gets easier? She asked. He didn't answer right away. No, but it gets different. She smiled faintly. That'll have to be enough. The girl looked up at her. What now? Evelyn met her eyes. Now we walk. They descended into the valley, three shapes moving against a world still half wild, half wounded. The wind followed them, whispering secrets only the land remembered. That night, They found an abandoned barn and made camp. Evelyn built the fire this time. Jackson watched her with something approaching pride, though he said nothing. The girl sat wrapped in a blanket, scribbling with charcoal on the back of a wagon plank. Evelyn leaned over. "What are you drawing?" "You," the girl said, "with fire in your hands." Evelyn looked at the crude lines, the burning matchstick figure holding back monsters drawn like clouds. She felt something break and mend inside her all at once. Later, as she sat beside the fire with Jackson, she looked at him carefully. "What are you really running from?" she asked. He stared into the flames for a long time. "A grave," he said finally, "and everything I buried in it." She nodded, accepting the truth without prying deeper. "You still running?" "No," he said. "Not tonight." She offered him a piece of bread. He took it. Their fingers touched. It was not romance, not yet. But it was something. They would keep walking. They would not forget what they'd done or seen. But for the first time in a long time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was surviving someone else's life. She was living her own. By dawn, they were on the road again. Westward, towards something neither could name but both needed. And in the sky behind them, the first clear sunrise in weeks began to rise. They didn't look back. Not once.